get to it. We'll do the HawksNest here with Curtis Crabtree and Tim Booth here coming up here momentarily. Curtis joins us. Curtis, how are you, sir? Tim Booth, how are you? How are you guys this morning on a Tuesday?
Good.
I'm good. How about you?
Yeah, one of you can just talk. It doesn't, you don't have to sit there and wait for one another. Curtis, take the lead for God's sakes. HawksNest HawksNest with Curtis Crabtree and Tim Booth, brought to you by Georgetown Brewery, locally owned and operated by two diehard Huskies, Manny and Roger. They've been pouring the best local craft beer for the past 23 years. Makers of Manny's Pale Ale, Bodie Zaffa, a host of your other favorite beers. Tap room is open from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7 days a week. Give them a visit at georgetownbeer.com. Tim, let me start here first with you. A wildly entertaining game, even though the Seahawks came out on the losing end. But hell, to sit back and watch it was fun.
It's been a long time since I've watched a Monday night game and just enjoyed watching it as much as that one was between just kind of how Detroit played, how Seattle had to kind of abandon the run and just lean on Geno in the first half. The way the offense responded in the second half for Seattle for a big chunk of it before they had to kind of, just start chucking it there at the end. It was a wildly entertaining football game. The lateral pass, the Ken Walker suplex over the defender to stay. Just a fun football game to watch. Like, you compare that with the Miami Tennessee game, which was about as I watched the first quarter of that and thought it was the most boring, first quarter I could remember. It was a really just kind of enjoyable night to watch football.
Curtis, ultimately, they end up losing a very entertaining football game, 42-29. There were certainly some moments that they could have been right back in it. A play here, a play there certainly changes the outcome of the game. But their first real test against a real, top-notch offense, and, they came away and they failed their first test. Now, again, that doesn't mean the defense is a failure. I said that earlier, but and I know that they had guys out, but they gave up 42 points and their quarterback on the other team didn't throw an incompletion.
Yeah, it's exactly how it went. And ultimately, you can't undersell the missing pieces that they had. They were missing half of their starting defense, basically. That was a real problem for them. To where you had Trevis Gibson and Drake Thomas and Kobe Bryant and these pieces you aren't expecting to be full-time contributors for you playing a lot of snaps yesterday. But you would expect to see a incompletion at some point in the game, and so they definitely didn't play to a standard that they wanted to last night on that front whatsoever. But it was encouraging to see the offense kind of step up and perform. The offensive line probably had its best game of the season so far. Ken Walker comes off his injury and looks phenomenal last night. The passing game is certainly everything we kind of think it is through 4 weeks. And there's a lot to like about that game and a loss. At the end of the day, the biggest problem from it is the fact that if you have to end up meeting Detroit down the line, it might be like a playoff tie-breaking home field advantage type of situation. But that's not a loss in the big picture that's going to hurt you all that much. That was a good, well-fought football game that you were on the wrong side of. And as long as you can bounce back and get your defense back to the levels I think they think that they can be at, I think it's not going to be a game that sticks with you too badly throughout the year.
Yeah, Tim, I don't think it was as bad as maybe the numbers would have indicated. If we want to look at total yards and all that kind of stuff, Seattle outplayed them in a lot of those categories, other than just what the final score was. I came away thinking, I'm different than you guys. I'm more of a fan. You guys aren't fans of the team. You cover the team. But I came away thinking, I was encouraged by it. Even though they lost, I was like, okay. It's not bad. I chalked this up already as a loss for them anyways. So it was like I went. That's my glass half empty outlook on life, Tim.
Yeah.
But I just figured that they would lose this game, and then it just, especially with Williams and Murphy being out, and then you just saw them being able to take advantage of those two guys not being in there. There was some massive holes open for Montgomery and Gibbs all night long.
I think the couple of concerns you come out with it defensively are the sort of the overall pass rush that you didn't have without Mafe and Chenna and the interior push that you were getting over the first couple of weeks with Murphy and Williams from the D tackle spot. I think that's a worry. I think that, as you point out, the gaps in the run game, especially in the first half for Detroit, on the interior were pretty significant. And I think you saw highlighted how important Julian Love is to that secondary when he didn't play in the second half. The Jamison Williams touchdown was just a bust where there was bad communication back there on passing him off, and it led to him being wide open on a crosser like that. Maybe that happens if Julian Love is in there, but maybe it doesn't, just because he's kind of the quarterback back there in organizing everything. So the concerns are kind of maybe your depth isn't what depth is always a concern for every team, but to me the depth of some of the drop off that they have if you don't have your front line guys in there kind of stood out a little bit last night, at least defensively. But to your point, I think you walk away incredibly encouraged about this offense, and especially that second half when you finally got the run game going with both Walker and Charbonnet. And then I put it out last night on X or whatever. That might be the best game I've seen Geno Smith ever play. He seemed so, take away the last series at the goal line where they couldn't punch it in. He just seemed so in control of all of the chaos that was happening around him.
Yeah.
Just there's constant pressure from Detroit's front, and he just seemed to handle it all and make the right plays, make the right throws for most of the night. It was really an impressive performance by him.
Yeah, I mean, Curtis, we're talking about 4 games into really his tenure with this offense.
Yeah, I think you could say that about Geno Smith's second game against New England and the way he played and some of the throws he made in that game. And the fact you've had 2 of those types of games already this year in 4 weeks is a pretty encouraging sign. Like, he's played outstanding football. Like, he is absolutely played to a top 5, top 6 quarterback in the league level for the first month of the season. There's not really any way to dispute that with the way he plays. He's been terrific. And then when Ken Walker is able to add that little bit of extra, make you miss ability that Zach Charbonnet doesn't quite have. You saw that in a couple different instances last night in that game. Their offense can really crank up. I mean, the fact that Laviska Shenault's a number 5 receiver on this team, Jake Bobo's a number 4 because of the talent they have in front of them. Those guys are good football players in their own right too, and that receiving core is really strong. Completions to 10 different receivers last night for Geno Smith, moves the ball around. Really manages the pocket around him pretty well throughout the game on a consistent basis. There's a lot to like about Geno Smith in that offense, and I thought both offensive coordinators last night, I thought were really, really good. Both Ryan Grubb and Ben Johnson were doing everything, the right counter punches, everything. It was a really impressively offensive called game.
They were both right. That was the one thing, because I was just intrigued at like Ben Johnson versus Mike Macdonald. That was a huge storyline this week. One, because in a weird alternate universe, Ben Johnson's the head coach of the Seahawks, and Mike Macdonald is coaching Jaden Daniels in Washington. And so I was curious to see the chess match between those two guys. And Macdonald, his hands were tied behind his back because he didn't have 2 of his best interior defensive linemen. But it felt like for Johnson, and then even for Grubb against Aaron Glenn, to your point, Curtis, it just felt like both those coordinators were always a step ahead of the defense all night long.
Yeah, and I mean, you saw that with Glenn, he likes to run as much man defense as he can, and even late in the game when Seattle was trying to come back, he was fine playing man defense, and they were able to just march right down the field on that all night, which is something you like to see. I mean, if you think your dudes are better than their dudes, you should be able to do that in some circumstances, and they really did that for most of the night, which is good to see. And then, yeah, you got to give some credit to Ben Johnson on the other side too, because while the individual pressure didn't come from the defensive guys, every time they even brought like their schemed pressure and stuff, trying to get some blitzes and stuff, they had the right answer for it, whether it was max protecting in the right way or hitting the right counter play against it, like the screen pass that they hit in that game. It was a really well executed offensive game for the Lions as well.
Hey, Tim, the turning point. It felt like the turning point of the football game was the penalty on Tyler Lockett. Did they ever get like a real explanation for that? I mean, it didn't look like a penalty in real time. Troy Aikman, I believe, said it wasn't a penalty. I think most people have agreed that should not have been called a penalty. And that's just a killer. They pick up the first down, and who knows how that game turns out.
Yeah, and I think the part of it that if you're in the shoes of the back judge or the side judge, whoever it was that made that call, if you're looking at it from that angle, you kind of see Tyler sort of lower his right shoulder as he's going into the defender. And that's him trying to us on the replay and the different camera angles they had. It looked like he was just trying to get his release. And obviously he's trying to run a pick on that play. Like it's not a secret, but it from the other angles, it looks like he's trying to get his release. From that back angle, you see him lower his shoulder in that instance and make contact with the defender and knock him off and knock him into the other defender and keep them from being able to get out to where JSN was at. It kind of looks like he's throwing a little bit of a block. Now, again, I think it was a shaky penalty to begin with. With how much that happens in the league and how much route combinations are based around pick plays. And in that situation, that's a pretty harsh penalty to make. But, if Tyler just comes off and he doesn't sort of lower that shoulder and he doesn't kind of give that impression, I don't think the flag is thrown there. But to me, it was kind of that little lower of the right shoulder that sort of drew the attention from the official that led to the flag being thrown. But again, it's a crap penalty in all honesty that they would actually call that in a fourth down situation like that.
Well, and Curtis, especially how they were calling the game all night long, it was just curious. I don't know. I know they were calling, a lot of, holding and pass interference and penalties like that. I mean, it's curious on some of the calls they didn't have, but, I think in that situation, the official, right, Curtis, they know what's going on. That type of play happens all the time. That just did not seem egregious like some other pick plays are.
No, it didn't. But like Tim said, I can see how that call was made. I can, because when Tyler drops his shoulder and then the defender that is covering Lockett gets basically run backwards directly into the guy that's supposed to be covering Jackson Smith and Jigba, like it looks like a pick in some aspects of it. Now, it's certainly not the most egregious pick that I've ever seen in the world. Now, you've certainly seen plays like that not get called. But could I see how that play gets called? Yeah, I can. There was one of the replays last night that made me go, okay, I see it, I get it. Even if it didn't feel like it was the most egregious penalty. But there was other calls that crew made throughout the night that were a little bit concerning. They didn't lose this game because of the officials, but there was, a few calls that, pass interference, non-call in the end zone to DK Metcalf that would have given them the chance to get down to the 1 yard line. There was a pretty big one, and a couple other calls that aren't coming to my top of my head right off the top here. We're a little bit curious as well.
So this wasn't like when the Huskies and Jed Fish lose? That it was because of penalties and the officials, or
I'm not commenting.
Just wondering.
I'm not commenting.
If you take all those out, they're undefeated.
Jason, I'm not commenting on Jed Fish and officials and anything like that.
But I mean, and Curtis, to your point, I mean, you're right. They didn't lose because of the officials. I mean, they lost because they couldn't. The other quarterback did not throw an incompletion. They had no answer.
And the one receiver who threw a pass completed that one too. So like they were 19 of 19, allowing passes to be completed last night.
I forgot about that. You're exactly right. I totally forgot about that. I mean, but there were some miscues. Like it just was a poor night for the officiating. I mean, to not even to look at the 2-point conversion, and I want to get to the 2-point conversion in a second because I want people to yell and scream at me that I'm yelling at the clouds and I don't understand analytics. But the 2-point conversion, I mean, he that warrants a look.
I mean, when the play happened, I thought he just dropped it. I thought the ball had hit the ground and it was incomplete. And then you saw the replay and you're like, wait, is his knee down? And then for them not to just stop the play, because obviously there was the flag there, just stop it and look at it. And supposedly Macdonald was told that the replay had looked at it and decided that it was incomplete. I don't know. It looks pretty damn complete to me on the replays. I think that's worthy of an explanation as to why they determined that play incomplete. And then I think the other one that really stands out as kind of, where was this crew at was the play in the end zone where DK got robbed essentially.
Got tackled.
Yeah, and for them not to throw DPI on that play, it's like, okay, if you're going to call this sort of 50-50 call on Lockett for offensive pass interference, how do you not call sort of that when it's clearly a lot more egregious on a
right.
jump, kind of a jump ball situation. So it was 100%. The officiating did not cost them the game. The way they played in the first half and not getting off the field defensively is what cost them this game. But there were some calls in there that you could definitely quibble with in the grand scheme of everything that happened.
I want to jump in, Curtis, to the 2-point call. What I mean, I know I don't need the mathematics to be explained to me. I understand the logic, the analytic logic behind it. I do not understand why you do it. There's 3 minutes left in the third quarter. To me, it just makes zero sense to be chasing 2 points there when all you need is a touchdown to tie it.
Yeah, I mean, I get the analytic math too, and I think it is worthwhile to have a head coach that is willing to play that style and do that in certain circumstances, given the way that the points are. If it would be one thing, I think, if you felt like the 14 points wasn't going anywhere, like it wasn't a track meet game where you feel like there could be another 6 touchdowns scored before the end of the game. I think the analytics and being open to doing that makes sense. Sometimes it still would be tough if I was in those shoes to make that call to do that, I think, because it's just the extra point and it's a touchdown game. I totally get that sentiment too. But I mean, again, not going to go through the nitty gritty of the numbers of it, but yeah, statistically teams make 2-point conversions a little more than 50% of the time. So if you do it over the long term, it's supposed to play out in your way, but you need to deal with the variance of the fact that every once in a while it's not going to go your way. So that's how it works.
Well, and then I would just say this, Tim. I just didn't like what they were in on the 2 attempts. I just don't like it. You get inside the 5. I don't. 2 things. One, I don't like being out of the shotgun. I don't see the strategy in that. And then 2, I don't understand why Ken Walker's not in there.
Yeah. And I think that's what you can debate more than actually going for it. In terms of going for it, I would have, if it's early fourth quarter, I'm 100% behind the idea of going for 2 at that point. I think, late third, I think you can kind of go back and forth on it. But more to your point, especially after the penalty took it to the 1, I just thought it was a bad play call. I just thought it was the wrong call for that. For that situation. And yeah, you should have, like, how do you not have a set that has both those guys on the field? Why don't you have Charbonnet and Walker on the field and just, create that uncertainty with the defense about where the ball is going to go? I just didn't like the play call. I thought the call was, going for it was fine. Maybe would have liked it if it was more, early fourth quarter to do that. But I thought just the play call itself was poor.
Yeah. F you, Grubb. You're not perfect. All right. F you. You're not a perfect offensive coordinator.
I just want to know, in that situation, why aren't you running a wide receiver reverse after a fake handoff?
You could have done that, or a speed option.
Speed option to the boundary, yeah.
Speed option to the boundary would have been great in that situation.
Would have been great. I mean, that joke's never going to get old. Yeah, I just think you have, if you're going to do it, I think we all agree, that you just at least put Walker in there to at least have the defense think that he's going to get the ball, because they're going to be more afraid of Ken Walker than they are going to be of Zach Charbonnet, right, Curtis? I mean, he just poses a bigger threat to them.
Yeah, he's the more shifty kind of back that can kind of get skinny and find a way to sneak through a line where Charbonnet's not going to have that make you miss ability in quite the same way. So,
God, how good was he though, Curtis? Huh? Nice to have Ken Walker back.
Yeah, I mean that. In addition to the double somersault play, which is just an incredible feat of athleticism. Regardless of whether he was, stayed up and got a couple extra yards or not, that was just amazing to watch. That cutback run, where Carlton Davis had a rough night for the Lions. I mean, he got abused by DK Metcalf, and then he's the one out there on that island and just gets absolutely run around by Ken Walker on that touchdown run. He's got some really impressive ability, man, as a running back to be able to do stuff like that. And as we talked about a couple weeks ago with Charbonnet, there's just not that ability from his game and what he brings to the table. Walker's got that different energy, that different gear to be able to find a way to do that sort of play. So really, really coming off the oblique injury and everything, he was terrific last night.
Well, and with the issues you have with the offensive line, your line played better last night, I thought.
Yeah.
But you still have issues. You still have problems. And with that, you need the guy who can make the defender miss. And that's what Walker brings. I mean, we saw it a bunch last night. There was a lot of those runs that probably should not have gone as far as they did that he had in that game, especially, obviously the cutback one is the one that stands out the most for the touchdown, but there were several runs in that game where, that's a negative play or a 1 yard gain that he gets, 4 or 5 out of just because he can make that guy miss and make up for the fact that the line, still has its issues.
How much do we know what the breakdown was? And just it's so hard to evaluate offensive line play and all that. But I mean, do we have the breakdown Bradford and Haynes?
Yeah.
Did they look better with Christian Haynes in there opposed to Anthony Bradford?
I don't know. It's kind of, it feels like pick your poison right now. But Bradford played 54 snaps. Haynes played 36.
Okay.
So
that's the most they've ever done.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the most of a split they've ever done. They rotated a little bit more, or they rotated in week 2 against New England, but it was still pretty heavily Bradford that week. This is the closest it's been to a 50-50 split. I thought it was okay. Like neither played great, neither stood out as being. It didn't feel like Bradford was as much of a problem as he has been the last couple of weeks. But. Yeah, they were okay. I guess that's the best way to say it. They were just fine.
Seahawks, I want that on a T-shirt, Curtis. Seahawks offensive line. It's okay.
It's okay.
That's what we need from Simply Seattle. All right, Curtis, the Jason Peters. Okay, make sense of it. Jason Peters signed to the practice squad. What's that mean? How do you interpret that signing?
I think it can be a little bit of additional help at guard as well because he's played that position in the past. He didn't do it here last year when he was here, but he has done that a little bit in Dallas. And with George Fant going on IR a week ago, I think it's just giving yourselves that little bit of extra deep depth just to give yourself somebody else in the building, just in case. I know Macdonald used it a couple weeks ago, the break in case of emergency kind of piece with Peters coming in. So I think the way that Bradford and Haynes played this, yesterday gives them the ability to stick with those guys. But you're also going to have, 2 games in 5 days here coming up where all of a sudden if somebody gets nicked up here in the Giants game this weekend, one more injury happens, either at tackle or guard, you've got a guy who's ramping up to be able to help you out in that circumstance if you need it.
Yeah. Well, and remember with Peters when he got here last year, it took him like 3 weeks to get ready to actually contribute to something. So, and no disrespect to Jason Peters, he's had an incredible career, but he's almost my age, and so like, it's just stuff doesn't work quite the same anymore. So, so the fact that. That's nice that he's going to be here, and that's additional depth. And yeah, I think actually he's probably more of an insurance policy for guard right now than he is tackle because, knock on wood, Storm Forsythe's actually played pretty well. But
Hutchinson didn't. I mean, you didn't hear Hutchinson's name called a lot last night.
No,
you haven't heard it much in 3 years of games that he's played against Seattle.
Yeah,
honestly, he has not made much of a factor in any of these last 3 years.
Yeah. And all week long, that was like a storyline. And I joked about it yesterday with Jim. I'm like, you know what? We just sit there and talk about this all the time. And watch him. He's not even going to have a good game. And he didn't. I think he had 3 quarterback hits. He didn't have a sack. He didn't do anything.
He did have some pressures. He did have some pressures legitimately, but no sacks.
Yeah, it was a mostly, quiet game from him. So Forsythe's played, pretty well out there. It's great to have Jason Peters around in case you need him because you have 2 games in 5 days coming up, but it's probably Atlanta or maybe Buffalo after that before you could actually count on him to actually contribute, if just because he's old and he needs ramp up time to get ready.
We all need ramp up time. Don't worry about it. You'll experience it soon. Just wait till you get to ramp up time.
This is why you have to show up 30 minutes early for pickup basketball so that you can spend all your time stretching and running and all that stuff to then go out and die playing basketball.
Yeah, I just 1 minute before and just say, you know what, it's going to hurt. So I just know it's going to hurt. All right. So, but after 4 games, Curtis, is this what you expected? Like heading into the season, or what did you think after 4 where they would be?
I figured this is within the realm of what I thought they would be. Yeah. I figured they would either be 2-2 or 3-1, depending on how quickly they got started and given circumstances that they actually did end up facing with the quarterbacks that they faced over the first 3 games of the season. Yeah, I figure this is basically where I'd expect them to be at this point. And I would expect them to be at 4-1 after this next Sunday, going into a key early season matchup with the 49ers, and then we'll get the chance to see what this division's kind of shaping up to be, because I think that's still going to be the battle by the end of the season of what the two teams at the top of the division are going to be, and exactly what these teams are going to be. I think we're still on both fronts, both with Seattle and San Francisco. We don't know at this stage. We're getting a little bit closer to kind of understanding where they're at, but with Seattle, we know that their offense is pretty dang good. The defense, particularly the rush defense, if you want to include a little bit of the Patriots game, might have a little bit of concern to it. I think it's too much to read too much into the passing game yesterday, just because of how many injuries there were, how real that performance was for them. But in general, I think we've seen a lot of good things from this team over the first 4 weeks of the season.
Tim, same question to you.
I thought they were going to be, before the season, I thought 2-2 was going to be where they were at this point, because, I thought Miami was going to have Tua and you were going to lose that one and then probably lose to Detroit and face kind of this key stretch coming up with the Giants and the 49ers. It's still obviously a key stretch, but being 3-1 right now, I think is a little bit beyond what I thought they were going to be. The offense has been much better than I thought it was going to be. Like, I thought there was going to be a certain level of growing pains with the concerns about the offensive line and implementing a new system. But, this is a credit to Geno Smith and what he's done. Obviously there was a ton of skill talent on that side of the ball. There was the potential for this to be what it has been for the first few weeks. And I think it's a sign of the, that's the grasp and understanding of what Ryan Grubb's trying to do, that Geno and the offense has played to the level that it has. Like Curtis said, go ahead.
No, go finish your thought.
Like Curtis said, I think if there's a glaring concern on the defensive side, it's the run defense. Last night it showed up, particularly because of the absences, but it was also there when they played the Patriots. And so that would be my, worry moving forward. Maybe not so much against the Giants coming up, but then, you got Jordan Mason and San Francisco coming in 5 days later, and that'll be a true test for where the run defense is at.
It felt like, if you look at the numbers, right, Tim, you go, well, I mean, they gave up 116 yards on 28 carries, 4.1 yards a carry. You're like, well, that's not that bad. But that really felt like a game last night where if they really wanted to, if Ben Johnson really wanted to hammer down on the running game, that those numbers could have been much worse.
Well, I mean, the first half, what was it? They were
5.5 yards on 16 carries.
Yeah,
88
on
16
yards a carry in the first half. They were, and it felt like it was 4 to 5 yards downfield before there was any contact, and that was
very Boise State, Washington State like.
Ashton Genty for another 53 yards.
Yes, there he is again. Still can't tackle him.
God, that was amazing. But it felt a little like last year. You know how last year it felt like it was every running back Seattle played was getting through the first line before, Bobby Wagner's trying to hold on for dear life and bring them down. It felt a little bit that way in the first half. To their credit, they were better in the second half in shutting down. But yes, if Ben Johnson with those two backs wanted to just run the ball, 50 times last night, then I think the numbers would have been pretty significant in terms of the rush game that the Lions had.
One thing that hasn't been answered, at least, and it's not just me. I think a lot of people had, question marks of what they were going to do in the interior of their defense, or in the middle of their defense at linebacker, the Dotson, the Baker, and then Knight. That hasn't been answered after 4 games. I mean, to me, it just still seems like there is a lot missing there.
I think Dotson's pretty good. I think he's actually played fairly well. Not having Jerome Baker, I felt like showed up last night. And that's Tyrese Knight being a rookie. When you're having to, no disrespect to Drake Thomas, but when you're having to rely on Drake Thomas in that situation, that's not good. So I think it's not so much how Dotson's played, because I think he's actually played fairly well, but I think it was more the absence of Baker. Jerome Baker kind of showed up last night.
Okay. Curtis, do you agree with that? Only reason I bring this up is because they had both those guys for the Patriots game.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree with Tim. I think Dotson's pretty good player, but we talked about how good Ben Johnson was as a coordinator last night. Like, you're able to find those little edges on rookie 4th-round pick linebacker and Tyrese Knight a little bit. I think that's partly played into it. And yeah, Drake Thomas
Yeah.
is a very small linebacker. He is an undersized, more speedy coverage kind of linebacker as well. And I think there's certain circumstances where he's not going to be. You can't have him on the field for big heavy run teams and that sort of thing as well, just because the matchup's not going to be great. So they do have their depth issues at that position overall as well.
Sure.
So and I mean, if you didn't have all the other injuries on the defensive line, you probably could have had a Patrick O'Connell called up from the practice squad to give them a little bit more depth at that position, but you had to go to the D line given the guys that they had missing up front. So with your practice squad elevations. So yeah, I think they were able to find a way to take advantage of those positions a little bit for sure.
What do you think, Tim, Mike Macdonald learned from last night? Just about his defense and just about himself as a head coach? No, look, they weren't going to go undefeated, and everyone knows that. He was going to suffer a loss, but what do you think he took away from that?
I think he took away that his defense is still a work in progress and that the depth still isn't quite there. That is probably going to be called upon throughout the rest of this season. The guys who are missing on the defensive front, the edge guys who were out, the not having Baker at linebacker, losing Julian Love in the secondary, like the front line. It's kind of been a thing with this team all along. Your starting 22, your front line guys on this team are really good. You could put them on on paper they would be on par with a lot of other teams across the league. It's that next level, and how do you fill in behind and make up for those gaps when you have injuries and you have guys missing? That's always the question that leads between teams, having success in a season and having struggles. So I think that might be the one thing that kind of maybe jumped out to him last night is we don't necessarily have plug and play guys here. Like Kayvon Wallace is a nice player, but you can't just step in for Julian Love. Or Kobe Bryant is a decent special teams guy who can be used in certain packages, but he's not going to step in and play to that same level, same capability if something comes up and he's called upon in a game like that. So I think maybe that might be the one thing that stood out about his defense. I think he's got to be pretty pleased though that when a lot of shit was not going their way last night, this team didn't just kind of turtle and take their lumps and walk away. That was not only was it an entertaining game, but there was a lot of fight that Seattle showed. I hate using that phrase and like, oh, every team shows fight in a game. It sounds like you're talking about a high school team, but it's true in this sense that was a game last night where they showed some resilience. And with a lot of stuff that didn't go their way, they were, one score down on the Detroit 39-yard line, and it just converted a 4th down potentially to go in and score a tying touchdown when you get a unfortunate offensive pass interference call. So there's a significant amount of resilience that I think stood out about this team, and that's something I think Mike Macdonald needs to be really pleased about.
I just think there's a ton to love and to like what happened in the game. I mean, I just think that yes, the defense did not play well despite those guys being out. But I think on the flip side of it, you go, they didn't put out their best team to face them defensively, right? They did not put out their best squad out there to face Ben Johnson. And who knows, maybe it goes the same way. And they just had a night. I mean, sometimes offenses, it's old baseball, right? You tip your cap, you move on. But I think to Tim's point, I just think there was a lot to unpack from that game last night that I think as a Seahawks fan and someone who watches it, you come away encouraged by what and how they looked last night. Yeah,
I mean, Jared Goff is far more capable of making a, injury-riddled defense pay than Skylar Thompson and Tim Boyle are.
Sure.
I mean, that's just a different level of play, and you saw that last night. But in general, I think there's a lot to like about this team through the first month of the season. I mean, if your only loss so far is to a team that a lot of people picked to be the NFC representative in the Super Bowl at the end of the year, and you played them well, played them strong while you were depleted on defense for 60 minutes and put up a pretty entertaining, tough fight, I don't think there's too much to get all that worked up about with that game yesterday and the way that they played. Do they have areas to clean up? Sure, absolutely. Getting Leonard Williams and Boye Mafe and guys like that back in the lineup. Chenna Nwosu's getting closer as well. It'd be nice to have those guys moving forward for sure.
Yeah.
But, offensively, I thought it was a step. They've been playing mostly pretty well all season, but the offensive line play helped out a little bit. The running game was a little bit better. And, there's enough there to like for sure from the performance last night.
Yeah, it just that offense has just got the ability, and I think I think we've talked about it before. To me, it was the most exciting part about this team this year. Was going to be, and even though you hired a defensive-minded coach, to me, with what you watched in the past 2 years with Ryan Grubb, and then also just to see you have a very capable quarterback in Geno Smith. We can sit there and debate franchise quarterback all we want, but you look at his playmakers that he has with Walker and those 3 wide receivers, and I think you just felt, God, there's a lot to work with these guys, and watching Ryan Grubb each game come with something different. And not every play looks the same. That's what just stood out to me last night again. There didn't seem to be like they ran the same play twice. Whereas when I watched Shane Waldron, it was like it was like 3 plays they ran.
His fans love him already.
Oh my God, they already want him out of town. I mean, the Bears already want him out of town.
Well, that was the
shocker.
That was the hallmark of Grubb over at UW. He used it was the same play, but it just looked totally different. Motions, shifts, formations, whatever. It's same concept, same play, but we're just going to dress it up and put it in a different form that you've never seen before. And that I think is what's showing up already with the Seahawks, is that they're going to bunch guys in a 3 receiver set. They're going to motion them. They're going to think about how the run game was doing nothing for the first, handful of plays, and then you motion Ken Walker and bring him back behind Geno Smith and throw a pitch to him and have Zach Charbonnet as the lead blocker. Like it's the same pitch play that you probably have run a million times, but just with a totally different look, and you're giving your running back essentially a head start on the play. Like, it's little things like that, which I think are just show up over time to where it's not difficult for the players to understand the scheme, because what they're essentially doing is the same thing, but just the way you present it, the way you show it, is so different that it's confusing for the defense to try and figure out.
All right, that's HawksNest with Curtis Crabtree and Tim Booth. It's all brought to you by Georgetown Brewery. They've been making the greatest Northwest local craft beer for the past 23 years. Manny's, Rogers, Bodie's Alpha, Lucille, all of it. It's all good. And it's good. Here's the thing about Georgetown beer. It's good for you. It's been scientifically and medically cleared that it is good for you. The tap room is open from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m., open to close, like old school college. 7 days a week. Visit them at georgetownbeer.com. You want to do it now, Tim, or do you want to save it for yourself? Can we break the news, or you want to announce it later? Because now as we're wrapping up, I just forgot that you've got breaking news. It's like, congratulations.
Do you want to announce it now? I'm fine announcing it now.
It's up to you. It's your news. It's not my news. It's your news.
It's October 1st. I was going to announce it today anyway. I'll put it out on social media later. But for the 7 people who are watching right now,
there's 8.
8. I'm sorry. 8 people that are watching right now. This is my last week working for the Associated Press.
Thank
Amazing.
God.
After 20 years. Thank God. Is that what you said?
Yes.
That's nice of you, jerk.
Okay, tell everyone where you going.
So I'm going to be working for the Seattle Times starting next week. I decided that instead of being Ryan Divish's competitor, I wanted to be his coworker. Maybe kind of, sort of.
Okay, so what role, starting with the Seattle Times, what is your role going to be?
Well, you know that little basketball team that everyone keeps talking about that you happen to be wearing a hat of right now?
There was a reason I wore the hat.
Oh, very, very good. Very good. That's going to be kind of the primary focus, that and helping on Kraken, Seattle Kraken stuff to start with. So
awesome,
following the expansion stories that plays out over the next few years, and hockey, probably do some baseball, probably still help on the NFL a little bit. So a little still kind of doing the jack of all trades thing that I've been doing for forever, but with a little bit more of a singular focus or specific focus, and not having kind of everything on my plate like I've had for the last 14, 15 years.
Congratulations, man.
Thanks, dude. Appreciate it.
Congratulations. That's just awesome. That's just so cool that you're going to be doing that role. I can't wait to see you cover the Sonics. That's going to be awesome. And it's just all of it's going to be sweet. It's just going to be sweet to see you in a new role. And it's also going to be great for you. So you don't have to work all the time.
You mean like this morning when I woke up to news of Gonzaga going to the Pac-12? Yeah. That'll be kind of nice.
Congratulations, Tim. We appreciate it for doing it, and you as well, Curtis. We'll talk to you guys next week. Appreciate it, boys.
See you, Puck.